truth and justice to prevail, even if this led to difficulties for himself and for his companions. Fourth of my categories is as prototype of the Sufi. Sufism is a very positive word in the West. People have more or less amputated it from its Islamic moorings. I'm talking about the endless proliferation of pseudo-Sufi, quasi-New Age movements that are now apparently almost universal. We know that Imam Jalaluddin Rumi is now said to be the most widely read poet in America. In these New Age versions into which he has been translated, the founder of the religion, alayhi salatu wasalam, has frequently been excluded, censored out, largely because the translators want to make money, and America very typically has a vehement, unthinking dislike of Islam. However, in the original of Rumi, the founder is there triumphantly, not as some prudent nod to exoteric ulama, but as Rumi's ideal, perfect man, the astrolabe of God, the model of the spiritual wayfarer and of the perfected saint. Rumi says, "This is my beloved, this my physician, this my tutor, this my cure. هذا حبيبي, هذا طبيبي, هذا أديبي, هذا دوائي." His life is a series of icons, the contemplation of which transforms the observer. He is the philosopher's stone who transmutes leaden hearts into gold. Some of the most ravishing passages in Rumi are those which describe the Isra and the Mi'raj, recalling how Jibreel alayhi salam couldn't accompany him into the ultimate presence of God. And of course, this most mystical moment in the Sirah is used by Rumi as the archetype of the Sufi's flight. So Rumi writes, "When Muhammad passed the Lot tree and Gabriel's observation post, station and limit, he said to Gabriel, 'Come, fly after me.' He replied, 'Go, go, I am not your match.' Again he said, 'Come, O burner of veils, I have still not reached my zenith.' He replied, 'O my sweet glory, if I fly beyond this limit, my wings will burn.'" Now Gabriel for Rumi, and really for the Sufi tradition thereafter, represents the intellect, which, according to this ancient familiar theme of Sufism, cannot attain unto God. Only the Buraq, the mysterious steed of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, which is none other than love itself, can make the final journey beyond the mysterious Sidrat al-Muntaha. Now, even more miraculously, after this sacrifice of the intellect, the Rasul alayhi salatu wasallam returns to the world. Here again, he becomes precisely the prototype of the Muslim saint. He returns to creation, so this becomes, obviously, for the people of Tariqah, the original paradigm of baqa, subsistence after fana, or annihilation. Now, for Rumi, his prophetic work, dealing with the hassles of Makkah and Quraysh, is but burden, torment, and suffering, because that's the price of love in the ascetical and mystic life. For Rumi, the whole geography of the Sirah, beginning with the travails in Mecca, actually has significance as milestones along the spiritual journey. He writes, "Did not the chosen one go to travel towards Medina, found a kingdom, and become the ruler of 100 lands?" In Rumi, consistently, Mecca is the birthplace, the realm of attachments, which the Sufi has to leave behind for the deserts along the way, finally to reach the verdant oasis which prefigures heaven and which becomes his spiritual kingdom, a place of transformed life in community and fellowship, a kind of blissful garden-like anticipation of eternity. But the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam returns to Mecca to smash the idols and to bring news of the kingdom to those of his people who had not accompanied him and who still lived in shadows. So for Rumi, the whole hijrah to Medina is the type of the purgative life. The struggle to establish Allah's order in the oasis city is inseparable from the struggle to establish it in the heart which it represents. And this again takes us back to his glory as the Khalifa, because in Medina he has this struggle in which he manifests some of the divine names of rigor as well as the divine names of beauty. God forgives, the Rasul forgives. God judges, so does the Prophet. So Rumi says, the Prophet is God's scales on earth on which good and evil are judged. He is like the ark of Sayyidina Nuh. Some will not be saved and must perish. And he says that the Quran, in the hands of the Rasul, is like the rod of Moses, Asa Musa, which is guidance for the believers, pointing them towards the promised land, but which is also a serpent which consumes people guilty of pride and unbelief. So the Rasul, alayhi salatu wasalam, like Musa, has enemies who represent archetypes of human distraction, egotism, a demonic scuttling away from the light. But even as he represents the Jalal and administers justice, he himself is entirely detached. Because as Rumi says, he is like the moon, and his companions are the stars, and the heavenly bodies are not obstructed in their journey by the barking of dogs. As perfect man, the Prophet ﷺ, does manifest God's rigor. But while Rumi accepts this as proof of his truly theomorphic nature, the Prophet ﷺ for Rumi is primarily the treasurer of Allah's mercy. Because after all, while Allah is wrathful, he has also told his Prophet that my mercy outstrips my wrath. So Rumi says, Muhammad has come as a mercy to the world, rahmatan lil alameen. And from the ocean of absolute certainty, he grants pearls to the inhabitants of this world, peace to the fishes. Let me now move on to the second half of my talk. I've sketched some of the multiple facets of the founder's perfection, which might, and I think will, appeal to those who listen carefully in the West. But the other side of that equation has to be, what in fact are they looking for, primarily? What is their idea of an ideal human type? Who are they looking for? Are they looking for all of these types that I've mentioned? Well, it seems to me that one of the most hopeful things that have happened over the past 100 years is that the West's idea of the ideal human type, and I'm talking about serious, conscientious people, has changed quite drastically. And you could define that transformation in two terms, borrowing from familiar terms in psychology: eros and thanatos, love and death. The perfect human being traditionally in Christian Europe was celibate, and the body was something to be fought. Now, of course, the reverse is the case. The body is almost God. The undraped human form seems to be around us everywhere in the modern West. A more complete inversion would be hard to imagine. Second transformation in this area of thanatos, or death. Traditionally, in Christian Europe and in Christian America, the ideal was held up as being the pacific, non-violent, turn-the-other-cheek Jesus of the New Testament. That, I think, is no longer the case. True, there are many devout Christians who do still believe that. There is a pacifist minority amongst them. But perhaps because of the experience of Europe during 2 world wars, the idea of conscientious objection and pacifism is regarded as being morally deeply problematic.